Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this webinar talk. My name is Jing Han. I'm the director of the Institute for Australian and Asian Arts and Culture at Western Sydney University. Before we start, I would like to acknowledge that we are on the land of the Baramatical people of Darug Nation, whose ancestors have been the traditional owners of their land for thousands of years, and pay my respect to First Nations elders, past and present. Welcome to IAC Artist Story Series. Over the last 6 years, I have worked with many artists. One of them who stands out is Nelson Nghe. I first met Nelson at a William Young's event, a quiet and a very polite young man. I then went to see Nelson's group show at a Rogue pop-up gallery and saw his artworks for the first time. I felt that his artworks were deeply personal as well as very creative. In 2023, I invited Nelson to exhibit at our institute at the beginning of 2024. The show was a great success. His works illuminating trauma and harm brought by gambling attracted and touched many viewers. The installation of an inside-out house covered in gambling slips had an instant and strong resonance with many people who started telling their own stories. The power of art was absolutely tangible. Nelson Nghe is a Western Sydney-based artist and a gambling reform advocate whose multidisciplinary practice is grounded in the lived experience of gambling harm as an affected other. His pioneering work gives a visual form to the hidden and complex impacts of gambling harm, particularly within unacknowledged families and underrepresented culturally diverse communities. Driven by a strong commitment to social justice, Nelson uses art to challenge stigma and shame around gambling harm and to raise awareness for positive change. In 2025, Nelson presented his first solo exhibition, Losses Disguised as Wins, at a First Draft Gallery in Sydney. I went to the opening. It was a very powerful and empowering show. His work was acquired by the State Library of New South Wales for its contribution to significant contemporary debate about gambling and their impacts on family. As an advocate and activist, Nelson has worked passionately with leading organizations including Gamble Aware, Wesley Mission, Financial Counselling Victoria, and the Alliance of Gambling Reform. And I've heard Nelson speaking eloquently on national radio. We are very proud that Nelson is a Che Fellowship recipient from the Institute IAC. He was also awarded the People's Choice Prize at the Blacktown City Art Prize. He has been a finalist in several major art awards, including the Fisher's Ghost Art Award, Hornsby Art Prize, and the Blacktown City Art Prize. We're very excited and honored to invite Nelson back to our IAC Artist Story series and share with us his story as an artist. Now, please welcome Nelson Nghe to tell his artist story.
Thank you so much, Professor Jing, and good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to also acknowledge anyone in the audience who's been impacted by gambling harm, and to let you know, the number for support is 1-800-858-858, and that I will always see and hear you. So can anyone tell me what a child looks like who's been impacted by gambling harm? What are the signs? What do you look out for? Have you spoken to one? Have you walked past one? Well, you don't need to look any further because you are listening to one right now. I was born into a world of gambling. I am the son of someone who gambles. I am the nephew of someone who gambles. I am the friend of someone who gambles. Gambling has always been a part of my life. And yet, this was an invisible part of my life that no one else saw. How could they, when it's such a normalized environment for a child? And of course, when you're born into a world like this, how do you escape gambling harm? That's inevitable. And what does gambling harm look like? Well, gambling harm looks like strangers knocking at your door at midnight, demanding money. People that I've never met who know where I live, that's what it looks like. It also looks like your spare coin jar slowly getting smaller and smaller. There's also a constant disconnection from parent to child because everyone's not really there. No one's present. And everyone is struggling with their own development, let alone the development of the child in the picture. So we live in this house that's built on sand, and the only way up is down. We all slowly sink. So what do you see here? Well, this is the child of gambling harm. These are works that I had in my solo exhibition, Losses Disguised as Wins. These are my memories. You can see on the left, it's a photo of me on Santa's lap. Or is it? Because what I remember is not Santa, but the gambling and the constant way that gambling was a present part in all our lives. And so I try and show you the picture of the child of gambling harm. And on top of that, I've realized that I'm not the only child. There are children of gambling harm. And so these are more works in the show I had, which comprised of over 160 found objects that I presented in the gallery wall. And the process of finding these objects and sourcing them was part of me trying to acknowledge and make unhidden the very hidden nature of gambling harm. Because these objects, most of them once belonged to people's homes, and they once were sitting in people's homes. So me uncovering this was trying to reveal something that's never been revealed. And at the same time, these are very personal objects. These are my personal photographs. And I also use found objects from government, from industry, so that I can re-examine and reinterrogate these objects and this space of gambling harm in ways that we haven't really seen and need to really look beyond how we've been looking at this. I also wanted the process to be of people coming into my home and me welcoming them and showing them what's on my wall, the memories I have, the big celebrations or lack of. And with that, it just kept growing. So this body of work started in 2024 and it's slowly grown, which for me also echoed the voices that I've heard and listened to from other children. That's grown as well. So as much as they are seeing and hearing me, I'm also seeing and hearing them. So speaking of home, well, welcome to my home. So these are three works that I've made that really try to, again, paint this picture and this space of home, because home is truly where the harm happens, not at the venues, not where the gambling is happening, at the home. And yet no one sees this. This is so invisible. So literally with all of these children's houses, I turned them inside out, just like my childhood was turned inside out because of gambling harm. And you can see the walls of these houses, they're covered in instant scratcher tickets. That's also reflecting that lotto is almost a gateway to gambling, because how many of us have been introduced to instant scratchers and Powerball and lotto before we were even 18? How normalized has that been? We don't think twice. And yet, this is an adult 18 plus activity. And that's why I covered the houses with them. And the house in the middle, the I Bet You installation piece, that first exhibited at the Institute for Australian and Asian arts and culture. And that's really where the house was born. And since then it's traveled to many other places and homes. And it's covered in Lotto and Powerball because it's so normalized. The news reports on it so much. People speak about it at work. It's such a topic, it's such a conversation. And yet we don't see the harm. The harm is always so invisible. The news always reports on the big jackpot and the lucky winner. But what about half the country who were unlucky losers for that one person to take all that money? Where's the reporting on that? The house on the right, I exhibited at the first draft exhibition along with the photo frames. And within the house, I also projected the Kaching Poki Nation documentary, which I really recommend everyone watch because we have not been given an education on gambling harm at all in this country. As children, as adults, as people who gamble, we have not been told anything. And so this film will tell you and it will educate you. I've welcomed you into my home. Let me welcome you to our home, to Australia, which is home to 3/4 of the entire world's pub and club poker machines. Is it any surprise then that we are the biggest losers to gambling per capita in the entire world? We are even in the Guinness World Book of Records for being the biggest losers. On top of that, New South Wales, the state that I was born and live in, is home to half of all these machines in Australia. How lucky are we? This one state that gets half of Australia's pub and club poker machines. And even luckier, Western Sydney, the place I've always called home, we account for 1/3 of all Sydney's poker machine losses. And yet we are only 16% of the population. And there's one LGA that has one poker machine for every 55 people. In other parts of Sydney, there are almost no machines per person. How lucky am I to be surrounded by so many poker machines? So, for those who can't read the characters at the top, I will read them in my dialect of Chinese called Tilchao. It says, Bao Jia Lao Hou Gi. The translation for that, blow up the pokies. You may have heard that song by the Whitlams, that very famous song, but you may not have heard that the word for poker machine in Chinese is actually tiger machine. And guess what? A tiger, it does not sympathize with any prey standing before it. It will devour, it will eat you alive. And what does a poker machine do? Exactly the same. So I thought, okay, this is really symbolic and quite poetic that my language and my culture have captured the essence of a poker machine. And my culture is also captured by the poker machines. So I really wanted to bring in these two cultures, my Chinese culture and then the Australian culture, because the Whitlams also sang about this, about the lead singer, Tim Friedman's own lived experience in Australia. And he experienced two of his band members succumbing to gambling harm. And I think when he sang this song around 1999 to 2000, he didn't even know what would happen to our country 25 years later. He would not have imagined the world that we and all our children live in. It's a new world, not just of poker machines, but of online poker machines, of online sports betting and online harm now. He would not have seen this. And yet this is our world. So the close-up of the I Bet You house in the middle, I've bejeweled the blow up the pokies characters down the side. I've also bejeweled the numbers on the lotto and the Powerball tickets, which tile up the whole house. Because that was the tradition in the family of me being asked to cross out the number for my birthday and everyone's birthday in the house. Again, how normalized is that for a child to be introduced to gambling within the family, within the household, and not knowing any different, thinking this is what we do and this is how you spend time with family. What did I know as a child? Well, I now know that New South Wales was the first state in Australia to legalize poker machines in 1956. So the black and white photographs that you can see, they're historical photographs taken in 1939 from the State Library of New South Wales during a time where poker machines and gambling was illegal and outlawed. And we actually blew up the pokies, believe it or not. These one-armed bandits, they were being seized, they were being destroyed. As you can see from the pieces of the machine, you can even see the reel there, crushed up, and people putting a hammer through these machines. So I thought, wow, that's unbelievable, because no one would believe that now when we have almost the entire world's pub and club poker machines. How could we believe this world we once have? So I made a home for it because once upon a time, this was our home. As you can see in the middle, on the top, it's a found object sculpture where it's a kid's counting toy, essentially. And I've used the instant scratch it tickets to once again show how introduced and normalized and a part of a child's world and life gambling is. And yet, I've used the number 1956 as a number for all children to know that that's the date in which all our lives changed. I'm a first generation Australian born Chinese. My parents and my family, they come from refugee and migrant backgrounds. Growing up in Western Sydney, this was my community. I was surrounded by families from similar backgrounds who came from quite traumatic experiences to this new country for a new life, and yet we landed in the hotspot of gambling and gambling harm. There was nothing else around except pubs and clubs full of poker machines. And on top of that, we had this industry that seems to really celebrate us. Because if you look at all the marketing, all the signage, it's our culture. It references our beliefs, our symbols, our colors. You've got Chinese characters on heaven, about heaven and earth. Of course, you know the machines all have emperors, empresses, pandas, dragons. We even had our Mid-Autumn Festival celebrated. How great is that? Or how targeted is that? If you look at the top right, that's the free casino shuttle bus. And look at where it drops off and picks up. It goes to all the suburbs that predominantly have migrant and refugee communities and families and children. It doesn't go anywhere else. How lucky are we to have a free casino shuttle bus that picks us up and drops us off? And then if you look at the bottom right, that's at my local club, advertising a new kids play area. And this is probably one of the few times I've actually seen an Asian child in any representation in ads or marketing. And what is it asking us to do? To come to the play area where you have to walk past the poker machines to get there. And this play area is open 10 a.m. till 10 p.m. every day, even past the closing time of restaurants there. So you can see our cold community was ground zero of gambling harm. We all came from countries and societies where gambling was illegal, and we weren't given an understanding about what gambling does. On top of that, our beliefs in luck and fortune, they're being exploited right here. They're being used to target us. How lucky are we? Let's fast forward to this thing called COVID and pandemic, because that was the best time of my life. And I'm not joking. For the first time in my life, all gambling venues were closed. And You don't understand what that does for families and for children impacted by gambling harm. Everyone suddenly saw the light, a very different light. And I was seeing this person behind the person who gambled for the very first time. We were suddenly connecting and having that parent-child bond. I was able to humanize this person. The second great thing from COVID was I discovered art, and art allowed me to humanize myself. I suddenly could tell my story and see and hear myself. So the photographs on the left, they're from the exhibition at First Draft, where I had the 160 works on the wall. And this was me personalizing, opening up, and showing people the child impacted by gambling harm. The work on the right, that's in the State Library of New South Wales collection. And it was a work about how dehumanized people are in the eyes of the industry. They don't see people, they see profit. And as you can see, there aren't people there. There's just profit. So art's been a way for me to say all these things and find the words and the language and really tell my story for the first time to people who I've known, but they've never known this story. And with this, the power of story has allowed me to own the story because this story has always been mine. But for a long time, it was a story of sadness and secrecy and shame. Well, I've owned it now. And it's a story of strength. And it's a story of shame on you, Australia, because I've had to now look at everything and realize, hang on, why have I been blaming myself and shaming myself when all of us, my community, we stood no chance when we arrived in a country that had 3/4 of the entire world's pub and club poker machines? How do we stand a chance against that? So now I'm creating an untold story and telling an untold story, and also realizing it's not just my story, it's on behalf of all the other children impacted by gambling harm who never saw themselves anywhere. And so how did they know they existed themselves? It's also now representing this to everyone else who doesn't see these children. So work on the left, it says for every person who is experiencing gambling harm, there are 7 or more who are impacted by gambling harm. 7 or more, like myself, because every person who gambles, they belong to someone. They are someone's child. They are someone's loved one. They are someone's parent. The work on the right, they're other found objects. So there are 3 tissue boxes, and I just spell it out plain and clear that in my state, we lost over $8 billion to poker machines in 2023. And that's the equivalent of $1,000 for every adult and child in the state. So even though I might not have control over that, I have control over the story that I can tell. And that's really led me to becoming an accidental advocate. So since making the art, it's now equally about advocating for all of the children out there who don't get to tell this story, who don't feel seen and heard. And that's what I did just last month down in Victoria at the Financial Counselling Victoria conference. People there heard from a child impacted by gambling harm. They didn't just see a statistic, a case study, a number on a research paper. They saw a human. They saw a person. On top of that, I've been speaking and sharing my story with the media. So the ABC News article in the middle, that was also about me seeing and hearing the industry and the government, because they're also people behind what they do. And so the work that you see that I'm holding up is a photograph of me and Len Ainsworth, who's been called the father of the poker machine, of the modern day poker machine. And I really wanted to bring us together and break down this myth about us and them, about the problem gambler and everyone else. because it's not just about the problem gambler, it's about the problem industry, the problem government. Because no parent chooses to hurt their child. And if that's happening, you know that someone is hurting that parent. So ask yourself who and where that's coming from. The image on the right, that was at the Institute earlier last year, where we had a conversation. It was almost a symposium of gambling and gambling harm in Australia, where I also met my accidental alliance and my accidental allies. So the gentleman that you see on the left, that's Dr. George Katsy. He's the president of the Petersham Bowling Club, and they are proudly poker machine free and have been for almost 20 years. And they are not just surviving, they are thriving. They are a club full of community and full of children who are not impacted by gambling harm. The gentleman on the right, that's Drew Rook. He's a author and a journalist. And I also recommend you read his book, One Last Spin, because that will tell you everything you need to know, just like Kaching Poke Nation, because we haven't been told otherwise. So now, what I tell all of you is that it's our responsibility to denormalize our gambling culture, to ask ourselves, are we proud to be the biggest losers to gambling in the entire world? Are we proud to have 75% of the entire world's pub and club poker machines in our country? And secondly, I tell you, destigmatize the person impacted by gambling harm. They are a person. They are not profit. I see and hear them, and just like you see and hear me, we need to see and hear each other. And lastly, all of us need to demand gambling reform, because this will take a community. This is a public health issue. And when you go home today, turn to your child, think of your nephew, think of your niece, think of your grandchild, and ask, what world do you want them to grow up in? A world that profits from hurt, from pain, or a world where we heal and we say, enough is enough? Thank you all.
Wow, Nelson, thank you so much. It's really so powerful, the presentation. I mean, not only touching, powerful in a way is you reversed lots of things, and that the reverse effect is shocking, surprising, and also wakening up. You reverse the home. Home supposed to be a safe place, but it's not. And you reversed the venue of the place of harm. It's not the place where the poker machines are. It's a home. And you reversed where the art is. People, some artists or artistic creative people, they actually exploiting art to promote gambling. And the so-called cultural safety is being abused. Just the way that you reverse everything, it's really powerful. And when you talk about the child, so I have so many questions. So audience, if you have a questions posted there while I'm having conversation with Nelson, you're talking about as a child, and you ask the first question, does anyone know any child who's been affected? That's such a powerful question because I actually didn't know any child. I did know of or heard of a Chinese adult. He gambled away all his savings, and by the time he needed to go to home, he didn't even have a ticket. But one thing he said stayed with me forever. And he said he felt so sad for his little girl because the little girl was waiting for him to go home to bring the toys or whatever the goodies. And he said he didn't even have a ticket to go home. So that broke his heart. So yes, a lot of the hidden nature is a big deal for this gambling harm. When you talk about your childhood, and I really want to ask this question because Last time we had this symposium, and we have many people, including Edmund Fong, and he talked about being a gambler himself. Gamblers are so good at covering up. That's also another hidden nature. It's like people can't tell. They're not on drugs. They're not drunk people. So they act very normal, and then they're very conscious to cover up. So they are very normal. You can't really tell. As a child, when did you discover there was a gambling problem at home? How did you deal with it, in terms of interaction with other children?
So I knew of gambling since day one. It was a part of, well, I was born into this world essentially, and the harm existed even before I was born. And so it was always there. And you know because you then see lessons about how to be really good at deceiving, at keeping secrets, at money, at conflict. And so it becomes a very normalized space for you that I think you accept as reality. And so I think that's why also a lot of children have not been able to unsee it for a long time because they don't know any better. They haven't seen anything else. And when gambling is so normalized and introduced to all of us here, um, it's almost like the air you breathe. Um, it was also something that I struggled to share with anyone because would they get it? Would they know? I mean, how could I have known myself as a child? Because when you're a child, you're supposed to be the child, you know, and all you do is be the child. And you don't know any different or any better, really. And so since then, I've started to meet other children and other invisible impacted others who then have sort of clicked for them and then now they see that okay, what they went through wasn't normal and it shouldn't have happened to them. Because now they see a story out there and someone who represents them.
Yeah, that's a very insightful answer. Normalize, rather harmful situation because that's a survival skill, especially for a child. And that's how they actually can keep going. Um, so it's really the up to the time you also mentioned up to the time you become artist and then you are able to use art actually to articulate that sort of give you the tool and give you the power to own and to tell your own story. So that's really that's kind of explain why you are accidental advocate. It's really linked, the two things linked. And then I want to talk about another link that you mentioned, the connection you give the stats as well, connection between gambling, addiction, and culturally diverse communities. So the percentage is really outweigh the population, and some suburbs do not even have one. But those culturally diverse, linguistic diverse. Do you see it's because of the two ways? One is culture based, which you touched on later on, like in those areas, Chinese, Vietnamese, and lots of Middle East or Asian sort of socially disadvantaged place, their culture tend not to speak up, tend not, cover up rather than uh, laundering your home problems. Is that the one? And also, is that like they lack language, so that leads to no voice. So what do you see the connections and explain the connections?
I think definitely these are really culturally sensitive areas. And I know that in Chinese culture, yeah, we don't air our laundry. We keep a face and we keep it in the family. It's not so things like gambling harm are not openly discussed or shared. I also don't know how much we could even share it and who we would share it with, because really, where do we go? What services are out there for us when you have this industry that uses our culture to do the opposite, to entice us, to get us to gamble more? Where is the messaging otherwise for us? Because we're being told this is acceptable. And in fact, this is almost good for you. Um, so definitely it's it's tricky. And on top of that, where do family members go? Because with Gamblers Anonymous, for example, there are so many groups out there and opportunities for gamblers themselves to attend support services. But there's only literally 5 groups that family members impacted by gambling harm can go to. So it's really disproportionate, and almost the family members have been left out of the picture because the focus is still so much on the gambler. But definitely, yeah, I have attended some of these groups, and that is the reality. Most of them are not from the cold communities. I'm
Yeah.
probably the only one there speaking up about this.
Talking about speaking up about this, because can be double-edged, especially mentioned that to these specifically culturally diverse communities, they tend to not speak up, not to show laundry there, to show their laundry. They so when you speak up, do you receive, because do people in your communities, in our communities, actually get upset with you or unhappy with you because this is the risk. Double-edged means the risk of stigmatize the communities, which have been discriminated a lot already based on the race or the culture. So do you receive that backlash in a way that people are angry in a way that you speak up?
It's been the opposite, actually. It's been quite encouraging and quite supportive, but also quite surprising that other members in the community are asking me why, because it's so normalized for all of us that they're like, why are you even talking about this? Like, again, this is the air we breathe. Like, what's so interesting about this? So that's when it really hit me that, wow, we have all internalized how normalized this gambling is. And again, as children, we go through life and don't think twice. And we assume this is the way of life. And also, I think it's about speaking up, literally. Like, no one in my community has spoken up until now. And so challenging and changing that is, I think, powerful for people to see that. And I've then seen them speak up more. And so I think it's not so much that we haven't wanted to speak up, it's more that we didn't know we could speak up this whole time, because this has also never been spoken about. And so again, it's so normalized that we have to denormalize it ourselves as individuals and always ask ourselves, hang on, do we want this in our country? Do we want to be the biggest losers instead of just accepting it?
It's really good to hear your answers, so the two, one is really encouraging that people are actually supporting that. And then the other one is surprising, as you see, it's so normalized and they're asking that question. That's also so revealing about the problem, and also the value, the meaning of your advocacy, so all this revealing the issues that are not being consciously aware. Now, I take a question from our audience, Professor Kevin Dunn, who is our executive dean of the faculty, and he's also leading social science academics. So he has a question: how much money does our state government collect from gambling? And how did Petersham Club assuage the loss value from pokies?
Yeah, really great questions. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I would love to be able to answer the first part of how much do we collect as revenue, because that would then show you how addicted our government is. And what I do know is that we lose 25 million a day to poker machines. So that sort of shows you the numbers we're talking about and why nothing's changed. And to lead into your second question, it reminds me of what George Catsey, the president of Petersham Bowling Club, said about poker machines, that it's lazy money. This is a lazy business because you're not really being a business in the true sense of it. You're not offering anything. You're just extracting very passively. And so I think definitely the state government is relying on this really lazy source of revenue. And the Petersham Bowling Club, they have an extraordinary story, which I know there are a lot of media and sources of information where you will learn more about the beginnings of Petersham Bowling Club and when they decided to get rid of poker machines. They also had no clue what to do, but they then had to put on their business hat and actually say, well, what does the community want? So what do we offer to the community? And never has the community said, we want poker machines, we want gambling. And so now they're thriving. I think their return on investment is over 500%. So they're a success story, and they really challenge the myth that the gambling industry likes to say to pubs and clubs that you need poker machines. You don't. You truly don't. So I encourage everyone to visit Petersham Bowling Club and to see really what the true sense of a club is, and to speak to the staff there and learn more about their story, because that really is the prime example of what we could be and what we could have, particularly in Western Sydney, which instead has all these mini casinos.
Yeah, I remember George mentioned that they actually invited live bands. And so that actually make people wanting to go there, So there used to be a myth, live bands would lose money if you did not have a poker machine. But then they, changed that and figured out actually that's not true. If you have healthy and entertainment actually attract people, not as you mentioned, lazy money, just taking money from some people and to pay others. It's just terrible when people realize that. I have a question about your art. It's really interesting. You mentioned, which is also very revealing, the picture you showed, that those people, they use art, specifically cultural targeted, what do we call cultural safety, but to exploit those cultural based people, and then promote gambling using all this gold color Chinese character and attract you in. Then you think you are in a culture, and then got you. It's evil, it's really evil. It made me angry in that way. But the way you have done is you reverse it. But how do you get the balance? You reverse it in the way, because gambling is such a hidden, and then your art, if you look at it, it's beautiful. Even the house, it's beautiful. But then just underneath the beautifulness and then artistic creation, it's ugly. It's a harm. It's a hurtful things. How do you balance that? So beautiful, but the core, you actually want to show the core.
That's a good question. So I started off doing art using a lot of mixed media, found objects, and then it evolved to using found objects from all around me. So I go out and I source these things from industry, from what's really happening out there. And so I think when art speaks the truth, then really it's not only powerful, but it can basically say no wrong, right? Because it's the truth. And so I'm not pretending to be anything but. And so it's made it a lot more, I suppose, easier for me as an artist, because I don't have, well, it's funny because now I have this endless source of inspiration as much as I would probably like to be inspired by other things. I think, yeah, I've got my work cut out for me, and it really is now seeing that art is the way I can tell the message. It's not the message itself, which I think a lot of artists make art because they think that is the message, the art itself. But art for me is just the words. They're just the frames that I can then give you the message and the story. So it's quite exciting because now I really have no limit. I'm not confined to just painting, to just sculpture, to just video work. It's whatever will tell my message and my story. And so that's helped me to realize that, okay, that means I'm not a painter, I'm not a sculptor, I'm not a photographer. I'm actually an artist, because I'm trying to say and reflect back our world to us. And it's not just through one particular means, it's through whatever means it takes. Yeah, and so it's still a learning that I'm going through, and trying to find other ways and also learn off other artists. And yeah, so I guess stay tuned.
Great answer. It's really insightful. And as I said, it's accidental, but not, like your art and your activism intertwined. You're constantly inspired, you're more inspired, and now you found a lot more materials to inspire you, and the other way around as well. So that's really interesting. Perhaps a last question. Oh, we have so much to ask you. We have to have another conversation. So my last question is, since you're, starting doing this art and advocacy, and you're very much in the public, so first time we had you were not yet. And the first time I met you, you were so quiet and polite, and now you're so out there and being articulate, eloquent, and this is remarkable. The responses that you receive, I want to ask. Responses from gambling industry, responses from government agencies, responses from art sector and responses from individuals?
Yeah, that's a big question. And the common theme that I've been noticing from the responses is that no one has heard this before, has heard from a child impacted by gambling harm, has seen them or witnessed them. And from government and industry, they seem open. And I think at the end of the day, it goes back to this being a community solution. Everyone will have a part to play in this, not just the people experiencing gambling harm, not just the government, not just the industry, but all of us as a society. And so I think that's why there's been responses from all parties, is because I think people do know the role they play. And even if you don't think you're impacted by gambling harm, well, your attitudes and your judgments are contributing to gambling harm and contributing to stigma and shaming. And chances are you probably know someone who knows someone who's been impacted by gambling harm. And there is going to be a whole generation of children who are going to be impacted by gambling harm, because it's already starting in schools where children are already gambling. And so how are we not all going to be impacted at some point, whether we want to or not? And so we all have a role, essentially. And so I think the response is part of that conversation that is happening amongst us, and it just needs to keep happening more. And we need to have this in the media. We need to see representation out there and keep denormalizing what has become so normalized. And also I'm pleasantly surprised that organizations like First Draft wanted my exhibition there, because I know when I was having a conversation with you last year, Jing, about this idea I had of making a house covered in Lotto and Powerball tickets. It was actually a joke. I didn't mean it. And then suddenly the response from you that said, no, you must do it. It just all fell into place from there, because I then felt seen and heard. And then my story felt, I guess, validated. It felt like I actually am a human being. And so to realize more and more that people are seeing me through their responses, I know that we can create change, all of us, and to not feel that we don't have a role, because we do. And if we want a world where we don't want children harmed by gambling, then let's all do something about it.
Indeed. Let's do something about the online gambling. You know, you mentioned the latest development, the way you say about online gambling, and I know a colleague who got into it, and you know, the gambling itself is so hidden. Online gambling is even more hidden. And it's just really make me wondering, you know, so we promote online gambling, but we spend so much money curbing, countering online scam. It's really same as online scam, you know. Um, Nelson, we're so grateful for this wonderful talk. And it's really wonderful to see where you were and now where you are. And, you know, next time when we have you, you will be so up there, you know, doing even greater things. Thank you so much, Nelson, for your courage, for your art, for your creativity, and for your brilliant mind, you know, to do your work and then to inspire everyone. And thank you for telling us your story.
Thank you all.